Today, I would like to talk a little bit about Steamroller, some viewpoints as an old Mark II, Mark III player on how Steamroller works today. I'd also like to give more of an introduction of myself. My name's Ryan. I used to be good at Warmachine. Welcome to Spell Rack. I'd like to start off with a little bit of an introduction to myself. I've got my little quip in the beginning that my name's Ryan and I used to be good at Warmachine. So just my background with the game. I've recently started again with Mark IV. It's been about a year playing Dust. Before that, I started in early 2012, and I played through maybe 2017, maybe into 2018. I've always been pretty decent at games, and so I started to get a little competitive straight out of the gate. Won my first big tournament in September of that first year. But as far as convention level achievements, I won 11 convention level events. I lost once ever at the finals table. My kind of crowning achievement is this year. So we won the WTC in 2014. So that was kind of, to me, I feel like that was reaching the top of the mountain. And after that, everything was less important because winning the WTC, right? Then that was the thing you were all after. I played cricks back in the day. I did the very popular Scars and Gaspies, but I also had a little bit of a special snowflake aspect to me. I played Gorshay 2 a lot. Gorshay 2 was kind of the biggest mark that I probably ever left on the Warmachine. Not many people ever picked up and mimicked that list. But Gorshay 2 was in the list pair when I won the WTC, and it was in the list pair when I won a lot of other things. Biggest single event I ever won was Lock and Load. That was 128 players. So that was a big giant field. So anyway, I just wanted to give a little bit of a background. That's why I say I used to get a Warmachine because, yeah, I have a good resume, but it's 10 years old now. And getting back into the game, I've got some of that muscle memory, but it's, obviously it's coming back. It's not all there. So I have the experience with the game to analyze it and to play good games now, to play well, but it's still a different game now. So to get on with a little bit of the topic that I wanted to talk about today, as an older player that, played with Steamroller for years the way it used to be, I wanted to revisit how Steamroller exists now and share some thoughts on it. The first thing is, when I look at the packet coming back to it now, you have all these objective tokens. You have the 40s, the 50s, the flags, and all that stuff. What we used to have was big 12-inch zones and 6 by 12 zones. They were like big rectangles or big circles. And we had some flags that you'd have to stand on and stuff like that. We did have some objectives like 50 mil bases that you put down, but it was a different circumstance. Being able to just toe into a zone that was, a big 12-inch circle, it was pretty easy to put one model in. Although being able to chase that model out was worth its weight in gold. But I like the new Steamroller. I like the new setup. I like the 50 mils and the 40 mils and all that stuff. It's harder to set up tables because you have to put down 4, 5, 6 tokens sometimes, whereas maybe before you had to put down 2 big rings and 2 50 mils. Right? So it was easier to set up. So a little bit more complicated, but very good scenarios. I like the way that they've widened out the map. I think that Warmachine, when I played back in the day, was very kind of, you played in the center 12 inches of the map. And now I feel like you play much wider. And I think it makes for a more interesting game, being able to use the full 4x4 table. Kill box all over the place is obviously a good thing. It just keeps everything, pressed up. As far as the one part of the Steamroller that I want to get to is uniqueness of characters in lists and the use of both of your lists or not. And so that's a bigger conversation inside a Warmachine. Lists these days, compared to what you used to have, are much more homogenized, right? A lot of your lists can be pretty similar. Every list can be an all-comers list, generally, because you have the spell rack and you have your cards. And so if you get armor, you bring your spell that helps you deal with armor. If you go up against a gun line, you bring your spell that helps you against the gun line. There's certain utility spells, obviously, that help here and there. And so everybody has a lot more answers. And so the way I kind of think about that is like, rather than having skews out here, most of the game is played in here. And if you end up fighting something over here, you just bring your list over here with the spell rack, and you're never too far away from what you need to fight your opponent. So if the game is that sort of homogenized and you have that many options and resources every single time you play, why do you need a second list? And so that's something I take my old experience where my lists were my lists and I didn't have versatility via the spell rack. And I look at lists today and I have so much versatility. And I like the spell rack and I like the cards. And I like that every list can have an answer to every game. But it begs the question, why do we have a second list now? Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a second list. I like a second list. I think that's one of the great things about Warmachine that still exists is having a second list. I love it. So keep the second list. Years ago, though, you had to play both lists. You had to play both of your lists inside of a tournament. And so if you drop list one, say you're at a 5-round event, if you drop list one the first 4 games, you could get into round 5 and you'd ask your opponent, are you list locked? Right? Do you have to play your second list because you've been playing one list all day? And it was rare that that was the occasion, but I had gotten to finals tables a couple of times. And yes, my opponent was list locked. They hadn't played the other list yet. So they were compelled to play the one list only. And so I knew what of my list I had to play. I don't believe that I ever list locked myself into finals. I think I was always able to, get both lists out there. Both of my lists back in the day with Crix were pretty like 50-50 on the meta. And so I always found places to play both lists and they could do a little bit of generalist things anyway. So these days, I would love to see a requirement to use your second list. I just think it adds another layer to the game. It's a layer of strategic value as you sit down and you play your matches. You do need to be thinking, I got to get the second list out there. Now, most people will play both of their lists inside of the tournament, but that's not always the case. What you could do is bring a really nasty skew list as your second list. You could bring double colossals with an armor feed or, whatever. You could bring something really off the wall that could be scary to a lot of people, or maybe it's massive infantry, right? I mean, pick some sort of skew list. You don't ever have to play that list. So you could just throw it out there on your pairing and then mess up your matchups. Now that is a strategy. That is a thing that you can do, a way to sort of manipulate the matchups that you get by putting a really scary list that you never intend to play because you like your other list. I prefer the ability to, or the requirement that you have to play both lists. I just think it would be more interesting. I think it also forces more diversification into the game. I think there's another video I want to do where I want to look at the top warcasters and their IH win rates. And you have some factions that have really, really, really high play rate casters because they're so good. And they kind of become the faction. I think Horus is probably the most caster because Orgoth seemingly is not that good. Horus is very good though. Dusk is similar. Dusk seems not that good. Tyrus is like a 61% win rate. I mean, he's still a monster. So, what does the faction health look like when you could just rely on and play every single game with this one caster? Yes, it gives you a better chance to win events, but it's covering up bad factions because you happen to have one broken caster or something. So that's just a thought process using my old information, stepping into a new world. I would like to see requirements to use 2 lists come back. The other item is that I feel as just something to bring up that I don't feel strongly about in any way, shape, or form is for a while there, we used to have character sort of uniqueness across our lists. If you had a character, Black 13, you could only put them in one list. You couldn't put them in both lists, right? Turn thing, Black 13th were unique characters. They were over here with Huxley. They couldn't be over here with your Calder list at the same time. And so that would add to list variation, changes in list design. It would evolve the meta a little bit. Where it used to be a pretty restrictive thing, I think now, because of the spell rack and everything, you could probably create more strategy in the game and more diversification by limiting the characters, but then still give yourself really good games to be played because you still have the spell rack. Limiting characters, it's an idea. The hard part is balance, right? Some factions really rely on certain characters, other factions not as much. And so you could really harm some factions accidentally with a restriction as opposed to others. Maybe it is balanced, though. I need to think about it harder. So that's it. A little bit of an introduction for myself and some thoughts on Steamroller as we go into 26, getting ready for the 26 season.